Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary with Carl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion, or we want to be contemplative, or simply ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to welcome you to our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that resonate with our fellow friends and seekers here in the desert.
Our hope is that you will find life for your body, soul, and spirit.
And now, here is our show. Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast. I'm Laura Forehand. This is Carl Forehand. I don't know why I said that because usually I'm like, I'm here with Carl Forehand. But anyway, this right here next to me is Carl Forehand.
This thing.
This person.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you want to share before we get going with our amazing interview?
This is going to air after our event, but we're hosting the Leaning Forward conference this year, and we decided to use only female voices, only women's voices, because of a couple of things that happened to us not too long ago, and some things we've been thinking about. So in the Leaning Forward conference, it's all women, and they have kind of some messages to the patriarchy and things like that, and it's really fun and exciting. And we're still taping, but by the time this airs, it'll already be over. But we will have videos available of that on YouTube, and we'll let you know where to get those. So make sure and look for those on the Desert Sanctuary website. Yeah. But that's not where we're here today. We're here to talk to Bob today, right?
Yeah. So Dr. Robert N. Miner is Professor Emeritus of Religious Studies at the University of Kansas, where he taught for 33 years and was department chair for 6 years. Robert, who identifies as he, him, has an MA, Ph.D., and is the author of 8 books, as well as numerous articles and contributions to edited volumes. He is a historian of religions with specialties in biblical studies, Asian religions, religion and gender, and religion and sexuality. His monthly columns have been published in whatsoever.org among whatsoever.
Whosoever. Did I?
Whosoever. Sorry. Published whosoever.org among other publications and online sites since 1998. And he continues to speak and lead workshops around the country. In 1999, GLAAD awarded him its Leadership Award for Education. In 2012, the University of Kansas named him one of the university's Men of Merit. In 2015, the American Men's Studies Association gave him the Lifetime Membership Award. And in 2018, Missouri Jobs with Justice presented him with the Workers' Rights Board Leadership Award. He resides in Kansas City, Missouri, and is the founder of the Fairness Project. That is a wonderful bio. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bob.
Thank you for inviting me.
The reason Laura couldn't see it is because her phone's about this big. It's like... And
I am a teacher of 3rd grade students, so I'm exhausted by the end of the day.
I believe it. I'm a father and I'm also a grandfather.
Yes.
I've been close to my grandson, and he's now 12. But I remember all the little years, and for a while I was actually what they called a watchdog in our school. The watchdog program, I don't know if you know that program.
No.
Is meant to bring in positive male models into elementary schools. And so I would go as much as I could because I really wanted to see how his school was going, and then help the teachers and lunches and recreate all kinds of things. And I did that for from kindergarten through probably 4th grade, I think. And then COVID hit, but then also it was they get to a point where having grandpa hanging around isn't always as cool and fun as it used to be.
Yeah.
Whereas before, it was just great to have grandpa around, So anyway,
Yeah.
now he's 12, and I can understand. I have sympathy for anyone, and deep appreciation for anyone who teaches elementary school.
I love it. I don't know that I would go any higher than third grade, but you're exhausted by the end of the day for sure.
I believe it, because I'm exhausted after a 50-minute lecture toward college students.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Bob, I already have questions, but first, we want to hear your story from your lips. So, in whatever detail, however long you want to do that, and however far you want to go back, we just want to kind of hear your heart and hear what your story is. We think those stories are sacred, and that they're special, and that we count it a privilege to get to hear them. So, when you're ready, go ahead.
Well, sort of centered around leading up to my career, how I got here.
Okay.
I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, actually in an industrial suburb called West Allis, where it's named after Alice Chalmers, which used to be there, made tractors and things like that, where my dad worked. My parents didn't bring us very much about religion or anything like that. They would sometimes take us to whatever was the closest church Sunday school and then pick us up after Sunday school, because my mom used to say, it's okay to have religion, but don't get too excited about it. So, going ahead to that, I had a pretty uneventful growing up, and then I went to the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. My first year, I was going to take a course, I was going to be in chemistry, and part of it is, and what's influenced me through life, are teachers. The teacher who was there with a subject that excited them, and so on. And that would include high school and elementary school as well, but I'm skipping all that. And my favorite teacher was in chemistry. So I started there. I sort of began to get in the first year, I began to get kind of tired of it. And I took a course in sociology, and the sociology of religion section was the most interesting to me. So I switched to religion. The University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee didn't have religious studies in those days, so I went to a college called Trinity College, which was close by down in Deerfield, Illinois, northern suburb of Chicago. It happened to be an evangelical free church school, which was before the crackdown by the church on their college and seminary to make sure it was being orthodox enough, the way the Southern Baptists started cracking down on all their seminaries.
Yeah.
In fact, after I got my master's there in biblical studies, I had a very good education. Within a couple of years, all the professors I had were gone. That's how it was cleaned out. Mm-hmm. So I got my master's in biblical studies, and also emphasized Near Eastern archaeology. Spent a summer on doing digs in the Near East. This was back in 1969, and then went on for my Ph.D. at the University of Iowa. I wanted to get a degree in a state university because I didn't want one that was going to have to conform to any sort of religious thing. And the University of Iowa at that time had the oldest, must still be, had the oldest Ph.D. in religion in a state school in the country. And it was a model for a lot of later ones, which have probably surpassed it in quality and so on. But it was good. And there I started in biblical studies, but I sort of got tired of that and had a great professor whose field was history of religions methodology and religion in India. And I switched to that. So I was always influenced by good teachers, and the fact that they were up there. I don't think I could have done online learning. I needed a teacher up there who embodied the subject and who inspired me for it. And that's why I really love teachers. One of the reasons I really love them. I just always been a great part of my life before I came one, even then. Mm-hmm. So I did that and did some teaching. I taught for a while at a school called Marycrest College, which was in Davenport, Iowa, while I was finishing my dissertation. And there I was the person who taught. It was a Catholic school. I liked it a lot, and also my colleagues, but I was the one who taught all the world religions things, and the only ones who could teach the true things had to be Roman Catholic. So I wasn't going to hurt anything, because if any, a worse thing, I was teaching all the wrong things. Anyway, but I was a historian, and it was fun. I have a lot of fun stories, and I enjoyed the people there. I enjoyed that, and so on. That school eventually merged with another men's school after it became co-ed, and now it doesn't exist anymore. Then I went to Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. Taught there 2 years, and then came to the University of Kansas in 1977. Now, in that process, I was, of course, exposed to so much. And it wasn't the kind of thing that I sort of believed that all religions are right or anything. I didn't have any ideas like that. Mm-hmm. I was too much of a logical person to say everything's right, because that just doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. I can't agree with everything. Yeah. But I was exposed to so many religions, and in the process, Christian symbols and stories always still spoke to me. Whether I was going to go to a church or not, and I was kind of back and forth with that sort of thing. And for a while, I was a member of a church here in Kansas City, and after the two ministers I like, a man and a woman, retired, I left that church too. And I'm not a member of any church, though I do give regularly to a Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, because that's the pastor who married myself and my husband, and also because they house a lot of progressive organizations in the church building. And so I thought I might as well give them something. So I meet with Pastor Donna every month. We have a lunch, and I tell her she's the closest thing I have to a pastor. But in the process, my mind's a stubborn thing, and some right-wing pastor told me once, the Holy Spirit's going to have trouble getting with your mind getting through to you. But I have never been an atheist or anything like that. Atheism to me is like a lot of other things. It's too certain. Mm-hmm. And, there isn't anything. And so I can't be that certain about things. I'm open to the universe and open to a lot of things. And students would ask me, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And a lot of times I would say, there's so much that's not in my experience that who knows? I don't make decisions. I never did in any of my writings about whether a religion is true or false. Mm-hmm. And I could write, I wrote a commentary, very thick commentary on a popular Hindu scripture called the Bhagavad Gita. Mm-hmm. And it was published here and in, it's 700 verses, but I made a commentary really thick. That's what professors do. And so I was published here and in India, and the publisher in India, who actually was a devotee of it, said to me, when I was there once, there's nothing of you in this. It's all the Bhagavad Gita. So I thought that was a good, he felt I'd understood it. Mm-hmm. And that was part, I lived in India for a year in 1980. And then I've been there 5 times total. The other 4 times for a month each. I lived in Taiwan a summer, and in the process, I got a broad view of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And it isn't that I think everybody, like I said, isn't that I believe everybody's right. Like I said, I can't, my mind won't let me go there, because there's still differences logically. Yeah. But I see insights in a lot of people, as well as I see in all of the isms that there are, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Taoism, there are times of insight, and there are times when I don't think they were they might have been too caught up in politics and government support and things like that. So I have, as I tell people about LGBTQ issues, every religion, every ism has at times accepted LGBT people and at times not. There's no consistent thing. Now, of course, a modern Buddhist might say, well, it's always accepted people. Well, I know the scriptures of the early Buddha. I know when it didn't. So I don't know if that's making sense, but I never sort of, there are insights from these things that I think are so helpful. And when I used to teach Living Religions of the East, which was my large class at the University of Kansas, I would tell people that I'm going to take the position of the believer when we talk about Confucius's Analects or the Tao Te Ching or this Hindu scripture or this thing. And so each time, so there might be a day when I'm taking a position and the next day taking another, because I also say to them, you know your position, hopefully. This class is about other people. So I was able to do that and do it successfully, and students liked it and so on. And so here I am. Now, I hope that gives you, there are probably all kinds of things I didn't answer, but that's kind of where I am now. And still interested in professionally in how people use religious texts and religious dogmas and religion. One of my chapters in the book, When Religion is an Addiction, is religion never does anything good or bad. And the whole point of it is people do it with religion and use religion. It's how religion is used. Right. It's how the Bible is used. You can use it the way Martin Luther King Jr. did to liberate people, or you can use it the way someone like Jerry Falwell or Pat Robertson uses it to shut people down and not even be in touch with their lives. So that's kind of the approach I've taken. And but it's not because I'm an atheist. I have all kinds of ideas of how I'd like things to be.
Yeah. So I was a pastor for 20 years, and I came into that just a little late in the game, not right out of high school, not right out of regular college. But one of the things I liked about studying theology was systematic theology. I liked that there was a system, but what I found out was the system was very geared towards that certainty that you're talking about, and that's what we end up in most theology. What would be your reaction to people who now would like for us to have a theocracy in the United States? They're moving towards just elect a Speaker of the House that's very evangelical, and many of them would like us to be in a theocracy. What are your feelings about that?
I'd want to first remind people and point out that this is a very sectarian view of their religion. That is, this may not even be the majority opinion of people who claim to be Christians, who use that term for themselves. And so we always have to remember that it's like when people want to post the 10 Commandments. Now, there are 3 different versions I know of: the Jewish version, the Catholic version, the Protestant version. They have one in mind. Yeah. And it's an abbreviated version of the King James Version. Right. But people talk about it as if they're posting the 10 Commandments. No, they're posting one specific way of seeing these things. And I've often thought, gee, if you're going to post the 10 Commandments in schools, Texas was proposing doing that. Then you're going to have to explain to all the kids in kindergarten what adultery is, what not coveting your neighbor's wife means. Yeah, go ahead and do that. I mean, that's how silly some of these things get. I know enough of the Bible to upset people with it. You know, that is. Anyway, so that's the first thing I'd like to say, is that it's a sectarian way of seeing things. It is not. It represents a branch of things that thinks it's the only true branch. And that after all these years, it finally got it right. And Jesus should be thankful that we finally got it right in my version.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one that our current Speaker of the House is promoting when he says, this is what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And it's certainly also a certain way of interpreting the Bible. It's a certain way of interpreting the history that we would say took place among Christians, Christian history, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a certain way of interpreting what institutions want that have sort of run this religious culture that he's talking about. And he might think it's literal, but I keep telling people there is no person who takes the Bible literally.
Right.
They pick the things to take literally, and they pick other things to take allegorically. The mountains rise up and clap their hands for joy and praise the Lord. Well, that's not a literal thing about geology.
Right.
And they wouldn't take it that way. But the things they want to take that way, they do. So I always tell people, don't ever call anybody a literalist, because you've given in the argument to them. Then you're saying they're the literalist and you're the interpreter. No, everybody interprets it, and everybody has their scheme to interpret it. And that's how every religious person in the modern period or in previous periods deals with old books like their scriptures. And so those are things I'd want to be in the discussion as people think about it. I'm not only not a fan of people who call for Christian nationalism, I believe that, and not only is it not American, the founders wouldn't wanted this stuff.
Right.
From all these originalists who think they want to go back to the origins of America, all of a sudden now we're not, because no one's really a religionist either. The Constitution and the founding fathers they use just like the Bible. People pick and choose what they want. You know,
Yeah.
that's how sacred things work.
Mm-hmm.
So it certainly doesn't fit, as I can see, with an honest view, and I'm a historian of American history, and it certainly doesn't. It's certainly not an inclusive view, but it is a view that smacks of the kind of thing that was used by very, very right-wing ministers and something during the Nazi period in Germany. Because we have to realize that there were ministers saying that the Holy Spirit, that Hitler was the Holy Spirit, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them. Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a good example, you know, who was jailed because he was accused of being in the plot with to kill Hitler. I kind of hope it was, but we're not certain. But anyway, he was accused of that, and he died in jail. But it's the same approach to things, and to me, it's very dangerous and destructive. And to me, it also comes out of there's a lack of belief that's behind these kind of calls for the government to enforce your religion.
Mm-hmm.
If you really believe God would do it, you wouldn't be calling the government to do God's job.
Right.
And so with fear that God's going to lose out, is what they have. We got to make sure the government supports God's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
because God can't do it, you know.
Right.
And to me, that's kind of an ultimate in unbelief. If you think that your God is running the world, and they'll say that, then it seems to me you wouldn't need to have governments doing it. Finally, my last thing.
Yeah, that's good.
At least on this rant. You can see I'm a professor. I just go on and on. What's that they say about professors? When there's nothing left to be said on a subject, we'll say it.
One,
That'll be my last thing. I'll
Yeah.
stop right there.
so we, when I was in a spiritual direction, some spiritual direction training, it was with some Benedictine sisters. One of those sisters said, she just went to the marker board and wrote, "None of us is right." And that was life changing for me, since I had been a pastor for 20 years and I was coming off of that and deconstructing and all this stuff. And she said, none of us is right. And then she just left it there and let us think about it for a while. But studying all these different religions, I'm real interested in your thoughts on Asian religions, because our son lives in Taiwan, and he's gone from being a pastor's son to just exploring. And they have Taoism and Buddhism and all kinds of things there. And he is so happy now. And he doesn't claim one thing, that certainty that you're talking about. So I guess my question is, can we keep exploring like you have been, like we're starting to do, and find something from all those different places? And in a way, maybe that's better than just latching on to what we inherited and becoming dogmatic about it. I think it should be obvious, but we keep having those same battles over and over again. So what have you learned? Because you've more than, most people, you've explored, you've digested, you've thought about, you've taught. Did I have a question?
I can understand putting known as right on the board as a teaching tool, but I don't agree with it because that's too certain. Or I told you, I can live in ambiguity.
Right.
And I don't fear it like a lot of people do. There's so many versions of Taoism, Buddhism, and so on. And I bet your son, right, is running into all of them. And what I would see is things that I latch onto, things from these religions, ideas from these religions that speak to me in the sense of they're helpful for me. I love the Buddhist idea that everything is impermanent, and that that things are going to change. Now, I don't know if everything is impermanent. That's an early Buddhist thing, and now they vary it. But things are going to change, and if you try to hold on to something, it's going to change, and you're going to lose it, and then you're going to be disappointed. It's going to cause what Buddhists call suffering. I loved the fact that I could be with my grandson as he was growing up, from the minute he was born, and I spent 1 day a week almost for a long time with him and so on. I would love to hold on to some of that. He won't let me, and the universe won't let me. You know how it is.
Yeah.
And that's true with so many things. And I find that concept helpful in my life. It's like when I tell parents who talk about, well, my kid is big clingy. Give it a couple months and it'll change. But that's true of so many things. Nothing is permanent. And so that's an idea that helps me in life to get through it. Now, am I searching for nirvana? It's like when people ask, do you think Buddhists go to heaven? I'll sometimes say to them, do they want to? That's the question. Do they even want to?
Valid question.
There's sort of certain ideas. I mean, the Taoist philosophers, like the fellow named Lao Tzu, who wrote something called the Tao Te Ching, or Chuang Tzu, who wrote the Chuang Tzu, have some really interesting ideas about relating to nature. And the place of death is kind of an interesting thing for Chuang Tzu. He's one that deals with death, but whereas most Chinese religions don't deal with death. And the philosophical side, they are at the everyday level, of course, because that's one of the concerns people have. One of the things that has struck me in all this, and I just wrote a column about it a while back that is coming to coming back because of the current situation in the Near East. It was called, I'll never forget what that Bethlehem Breakfast Club taught me. And when I was on my archaeological tour back when I got my master's degree and I was a young graduate student, I spent some time in a guest house in Bethlehem. You know, that one, as in a little town of Bethlehem. Mm-hmm. And I would go to Manger Square. It sounds all kind of romantic on it. And there was a coffee shop there. And these 6 Palestinians, old Palestinian men, would meet together every morning for breakfast. The way old men do around the country at the diners and stuff. They'd argue, they'd do that, but they loved each other in a sense that 2 of them, I think, were Muslim Palestinians. 2 of them were Jewish Palestinians. One was a Christian Palestinian, and one was an atheist who claimed the PLO was the answer. The secular PLO was the answer to everything. And they lived together, and they'd been together for years. They weren't what they call the newcomers. They had been there for years. And as they took me in, sort of, we're going to teach something to this young graduate whippersnapper. And I was ready to listen. Mm-hmm. And they did. And it was the first place where I was taught. They said they did not like it when people say, well, look at the Near East. They've always been fighting over there. They said, we've never been fighting. We all get along. We're all Palestinians. See, that was their first definition of who they were. Mm-hmm. And Palestine was a bigger definition then than it is now. But they were all Palestinians, and that's what they had in common. Those customs from their culture and so on and so forth. And if they argued religion, it was teasing each other. But they taught me that. They said, we never had these problems. It's the politicians who bring it in. It's the people who want to use our religion to bring it in. And they were upset, and that's what they wanted to teach me. Now, at the grassroots level, where people go to temple, mosque, church, synagogue, shrine, whatever they go to, there's so much in common. I used to say I'll define religion for people of what's of ultimate concern. But what is what's ultimate concern to the people who go to these things? It's not the politics of everything. It's my husband's in the hospital. God, can you help him get through this? My son's growing up and he's going to go to college. Can you help him get into a good college? My daughter's thinking of marrying someone. I hope he's good to her. You know, that's what people pray for every single place in the world, right? And we have that in common. We can understand that humanity behind that. Mm-hmm. When I was in Taiwan, I'll tell you another story. I was there on a scholarship, on a grant, and I was given a Taiwanese master's degree education student as an interpreter and so on, because I could read Chinese, but I would not be very good at it. And he considered himself an atheist. And so he would go around with me. So he said one time, we were in Taipei, he said, let's go to where my mom used to go to temple. And she used to take me. And she used to do bye-bye. That's what they called worship in the temple in Taiwan. I think they still do. And so we went there. And as we were riding in the bus, I said to him, why do you think your mom, he went along with her as a little kid. I think, why do you think your mom went to this here? I said, I don't know. She was just believed in religious things. I said, maybe she was praying that her son would grow up to go to a good college and become a teacher and get his master's degree, which is what this guy was doing. And he never thought about that. Never thought about that. Mm-hmm. See, that's the human element.
Right.
And so when we went there, and I wasn't trying to convert him, I was just being a professor trying to get him to understand his mom and her religion, because he was an atheist. Yeah. And when he went there, he actually did bye-bye while I was there with him. Mm-hmm. Now, I wasn't trying to, as I said, it's at that level. It's at the humanity level that religion and spirituality speaks to me around the world. And that can mean a Muslim, the most common practice among Muslims is worshiping at saints' tombs. And in India, they do the same things at Muslim saints' tombs as Hindus do at temples. They bring the same offerings, they do the same thing. Now, they're not supposed to do that according to the great fundamentalist Muslim leaders, but that's where people are. That's humanity. So it's how religion is used. And this is what I argued again and again in When Religion is an Addiction. How is religion used by people? Is it used to open them up? Is it used to deal with their issues? Or is it used to deny their issues and blame it on religion? I wouldn't be against gay people, but God is against gay people. So I have to be against gay people. It's not me. It's not my prejudice. It's God. Right. God is the rat about this.
Right.
And that's like saying, that's like an alcoholic saying who's not in recovery, the alcohol made me do it. And so they aren't taking responsibility as a human being for how they do it, how they use it. And so that's been my interest, is how is religion used for good or for bad? Now that's more of an answer than the question, but I hope that was.
So speaking of politicians, you may or may not know that today in our House of Representatives and U.S. Senate, there was two fights. One was a U.S. senator that stood up and physically vowed to fight the guy he was interviewing. The Speaker of the House that just got whatever happened to, got voted out, elbowed one of the guys that voted against him in the kidneys today. and you talked a little bit ago about what kind of the evidence in my religion. We would have said fruit. What's the fruit? What do you see coming out of these people? I find it hard for someone to say we want everybody in our country to do exactly what we're doing and to see the results of that and to see how it plays out. I would at least hope, if they're demanding that all of us be like them, that they'd be a better example. Yeah, I know.
They kind of look and say we should believe in Jesus, but they don't believe in what he's teaching.
Right.
And I mean, according to what's in the Gospels.
And don't practice. Yeah, and don't practice.
Yeah. Sure. And they're very good at worshiping an image of Jesus they have, and that they've created. But when it comes down to helping the poor, doing the homeless, making sure you take care of the refugee in your town, all this kind of thing, they're not interested in that. And that just shows you again, and here's that picking and choosing. We can use this and using it. And I don't think they're often thinking that way. I think this is a mindset that they've gotten really used to. And it requires something like what they would call in rehab programs an intervention. And that means we have to model how it should be in our minds as we understand it, not try to enable what's doing. And we're seeing in our culture right now, even though this is really a minority position that these people represent, we know that from every time there's an election, we know where that goes. The reason I proved that again. But even though it's a minority position, we're seeing a very loud, power-driven. Power is the issue for so much of this, which again, to me, comes out of insecurity about what you believe, about what you feel, and it's also very victim-oriented. We are victims of, and you name it, LGBTQ people, drag queens, liberals, culture, you name it, we're a victim of it. And that's what we're seeing in kind of a I don't know how long it's going to last, but it's very dangerous. And it's sort of like the movie where the knight is fighting the dragon, and he slays the dragon. And as he turns his back and walks away, the dragon has one more sweep of the tail. And that's the dangerous one. I kind of think that's where we are. So this is a very dangerous time, and we can't turn our back on it. But I really think it comes out of a lack of faith. It comes out of a insecurity about their God, and insecurity about their God's in charge. There's all the things they say, and insecurity about their God being good to them. It's a very fearful thing, and very lack of belief in what they claim they believe. It seems to me, as I look at it.
I was kind of longing for. Been reading something about how countries like Norway and Sweden, where in those countries, the way I understand it, if you're going to get married, you'd still get married in the old cathedral church, because that's what we do. And they have some traditions like that. But by and large, they're very unreligious. They're one of the top countries that are not very religious at all. Yet, you're talking about what did Christ value, and they're actually living out those things well, and they're thriving, and their society's doing well. And you can't base everything on causation or whatever. You understand that way better than I do, but it almost seems sometimes the most unlikely people are who are showing us the way. I tend to think that by staying open, you'll see those people more often.
I think so. I think American Christianity, the kind that we're talking about, not broadly, because we've got great variety. I think it's very apocalyptic. And it has always sort of come back to, in many ways, the end times. And that's a very apocalyptic view, that there's not a positive hope in this world. And I think that's dominated American Christianity. When religions come to a culture, they pick up so much from the culture. So American Christianity is not like the kind of Christianities in Europe. Like Buddhism in Thailand is not like Buddhism was in India. Buddhism in China is different. Buddhism in Japan has different practices. So an American Christian, one scholar who I studied under as an American church historian, his name was Sidney Mead, used to call America the marketplace of souls. And he meant that because America is very capitalistic marketplace, and how many souls you get in the pews on Sunday morning is the measure of your success. And how that ever got to be involved with spirituality, is just, it says it has to be in a culture that is, whereas capitalism is the religion more than Christianity. And I think, and that's what happened, is the people who are promoting that are also promoting capitalism as the best way to do everything. And that goes back generations, and even to the Protestant Reformation, some would argue, and Calvin and stuff like that. But it's and here you have these countries where church attendance is down, and yet you're right, they're making sure people are taken care of as best they can. And those are the countries where the measurement of the fruits, as you like to call it, of infant mortality, women's mortality rates, and so on, is so good compared to us. Healthcare, you just name all the things. And sometimes I wonder if the people want to be apocalyptic and want everything to turn out to some final war that'll take place, and the only salvation is for Christians to be taken up in a cloud or something. I think sometimes they don't like that because they don't want those issues solved. And they certainly don't want them solved by government, because if government does those things, then our charities can't. And a guy named Reinhold Niebuhr, I don't know if that he was a old Lutheran theologian from around the World War II and so on. He talked about the sin of charity. And it was this, that if you got taxed to take care of the poor, you can't take credit for that. But if you aren't taxed and there are poor, and you give to the poor, you'll get all kinds of credit. It is such a good ego booster. I can help these poor people, and look at I am. God must really love me. And he called that the sin of charity. It was actually, he called it pride. Mm-hmm. Now, how everyone relates to that, that's an interesting, it's a difference. And there's the difference you're pointing out in one ways to, if we look at Scandinavian countries, if we look at healthcare most places in the world, just healthcare. It doesn't have to be Scandinavian, It takes away from this idea. And then there's kind of a unique American idea that comes down from certain branches of Christianity, that suffering is good for you. Mm. And I don't believe that. I don't think you need to know evil to appreciate good.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is look at a child and see how they appreciate good without knowing evil. Now, we might say they need to grow up, but that means buying into our ideas of things, not the way they were when they were born.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. That's a 30 or 45-minute conversation, probably.
Yeah.
So is it realistic to think that we, or maybe we don't want to, I don't know. I want to know what you think about, like, is there a way to turn this ship around? I mean,
that's not the word you wanted to.
No, I do want to say ship.
and I say yes. Now, I'm not an optimist, but I choose hope. Because I think hopelessness is a feeling. That's a feeling that covers up deeper feelings like fear, hurt, confusion, and so on. But hope is a choice. And I choose to live in hope. And I think the way is there. I think something like what you're doing right here is part of the turnaround of the ship. I think standing as a person who says, no, I think you're wrong when it comes to a Christian nationalism or something. I want you to know that I do not agree with you. That's more like an intervention than enabling. If we try to maybe this and maybe that and maybe this and maybe I can give in on this, we're enabling.
Yeah.
Because that says to them, I must be right because you're coming my way.
Yeah.
So even though this sounds kind of mean, it doesn't have to be mean. I think it is the standing up of people who say, no, I think that's wrong. And just saying that, they don't have to say anything profound or anything like that. No, they speak out of their experience. I'm not going to blame God for what I say. I'm not going to blame psychology. I'm not going to blame history. I'm not going to blame tradition. Tradition is just looking at history, what you like, and leaving out what you don't like anyway. But I'm not going to blame any of that. I'm going to say, you are standing in front of a person who does not agree with you and doesn't agree with you in time. I'll give you a quick example. When I write something on LGBT issues, I will often get an email, long email, and it will have all the verses that have been used against LGBTQ people in the Bible. They call it cloud, and it'll have long discussions of each one. Now, someone went to a lot of trouble to do that. Now, there are two things I can do. One is I can engage in that conversation. This person's saying you're a professor, you have no biblical studies, but you probably didn't read these things. Okay. I can engage in that, but that is encouraging a conversation. That's like arguing with a drunk. Is tequila or vodka better for you? They like that kind of conversation because it's not about what is your problem. Mm-hmm. So I respond by this. I want you to know that I received your email. Now, I don't even say thank you for your email because I'm not really thankful.
Right.
I want you to know that I've received your email. Please understand that I disagree with you at every point in it. Good luck in your spiritual journey, Robert N. Miner, M.A., Ph.D. Now, that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, you having this podcast are doing that. Well, you may not sound as mean as what I just said, but you're doing that because you're standing up saying there is an alternative. Mm-hmm. And it's like a parent bringing up a child. You may bring up a child in a certain way, and they may choose, because they have many other things, to not go in that way. Mm-hmm. But they will always know, but my dad and my mom thought differently. Mm-hmm. They'll always know that exists. And that's the key. The key is each of us being there, being present, embodying what we believe is a healthy way of seeing life. And saying sometimes, no, I don't agree with that. And not having to justify it. I will do a speech at something, and someone will come up at a church, and someone will come up and, well, what about Romans 1? Mm-hmm. And the answer I give is, I know a lot of people interpret it the way you do, I don't. What about 1 Corinthians? Well, I know a lot of people interpret it the way you, I don't. Well, what about Leviticus? I know a lot of people interpret it the way you, I don't. That's it. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be anything, but it's you being present there. Being present. And it also means learning where you get triggered, where I get triggered.
Yeah.
We all get triggered because we've all had religious abuse in our life.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard it on the radio. We've heard it on the TV. We've heard it. We can hear it right from that Speaker of the House. We've all had religious abuse. So we have to know when we're triggered. But we've got to stick with it and got to just be there and come out as someone who says, no, I disagree.
That's a really good answer. And I couldn't help but think about, like, that's similar to what we need to do with our students in our classroom. Like, you have to be careful that you don't get into these, I like to call them, downstairs brain or limbic system arguments with, an 8 or 9-year-old. It's easy to do because you want to defend your point or you want to be right or whatever. But a lot of times in doing that, I find that I'm really just feeding into what they want, which is just to argue.
Yeah. I tell people when we come into a discussion to win it,
mm-hmm.
we've lost it.
Yeah.
It's not about winning.
Yeah.
It's about telling people where we are. It's about telling our story, as you asked me to do. It's
mm-hmm.
about telling our story, which is our story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about, and not trying to justify it and not trying to win it. I don't have to win them. And I don't know what the result is going to be as they walk away from me, apparently disagreeing. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I'm just a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And we all are, and the whole trying to fix this world is not on our shoulders at any one time. That's too much to do. Yeah. I also tell people, whatever you do, don't do it perfectly. Because perfectionism leads to procrastination and leads to paralysis. So I tell people, if you have been a perfect parent, you need to plan in a mistake every so often. Because kids don't need perfect parents. They need models of what to do when you've made a mistake.
Right.
And how to apologize.
That's right.
And how to make amends and
Yep.
so on.
Yep.
And that's true for us too. Otherwise, we put so much pressure on us that we can't be present. That's the part with being present, being personal, and being persistent. The 3 P's of difficult conversations.
That's good stuff. Go ahead.
So I've been hearing this illustration a lot lately, and they introduced it by asking this question and said, what are the countries that handled the COVID crisis well? What do the top countries have in common that handled COVID very well? And the answer is they all had women leaders. And you can draw all kinds of...
That's interesting. Iceland would be an example.
Yeah.
And
Then actually, because of that, they also handled the banking crisis well.
yeah. Yeah. And so
There's something to be said. A lot of what goes on, if I might go with my men's studies hat, a lot of what goes on, and I think we're seeing this in the battle in the Near East and why it's difficult to do this, is what came to be called toxic masculinity in action.
Mm-hmm.
And as Gandhi said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and the whole world is blind and toothless. And I'm not trying to take a side or anything like that, and that it's an awful situation.
Sure.
And it's got so many things that I said, but I think a lot of times what goes on at the top of countries, I hear these representatives and senators talking, and sometimes they sound like they're talking like punishing fathers. We can't let them get away with this, and that type of thing.
Pastors.
And so you're right. It makes sense to me that unless a woman is trying to prove that she's as ruthless as a man, that's what I met Indira Gandhi when I was in India in 80, and she said, I'm as ruthless as any man, and she proved it. But unless she's trying to do that, I think there's a space there that because of the sex of actually, women have been given to think more broadly of things. Mm. And men are like logic and da 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 da. And I think women have had to do it to cope with the sexism actually and the patriarchy. But I think that also gives them a sense of, where do we first hear the idea of win-win solutions? Came from the feminist movement. Mm. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah. So we're doing what we can to amplify women's voices. I used to love to speak when I was a pastor. Anymore, I'm almost happy to give my spot up if I have to do that. But I think Laura has a couple more questions for you. We're just about done.
Yeah. So one thing we like to ask our guests is if you could put up a billboard anywhere, what would you put on that billboard? And it can be as long or as short as you want it to be. But if you had a message for the world, what would that be?
I think I'd want to say something like, are we listening to each other?
That's so good.
Mm-hmm.
There are many other things I like to say, but that's the first thing that came to mind. Are we listening to each other?
Yeah, like really listening to each other.
Yeah. And I don't think we do that.
I agree.
And of course, one of the things men have been taught is they have to have answers for everything. So women say, you aren't listening. You're coming up with answers. And they're right. So I guess that's kind of with the same thing.
We started taping these episodes for this conference.
Yeah.
And these 3 or 4 of the women, without talking to each other, said the same thing.
Yep.
They said, tell men to stop interrupting us and listen to us.
And listen.
And with, and almost in the same tone, in the exact same words that came out. So it seems significant to me.
Very significant. Yeah. So where can people find you if they want to know, I don't know, maybe if they have a question for you or want to know more about your work, where can they find you?
You can go to fairnessproject.org, fairnessproject.org. And that's the website where it has I do a monthly column. It has a monthly column. If they want to, if they want more junk in their email box, they can sign up for it, or they can see it. It talks about where my stuff is printed and published. My books are there, and they can go directly to my distributor, who's an independent distributor, or they can go to Amazon if they want. The workshops I do, the kinds of seminars for people who want to go there, because they'd like me to do a seminar for them, so on. I've done quite a few now on Zoom, which is kind of nice because organizations a lot of times don't have a lot of money, so it doesn't cost to bring me out, to do that. So they can go there for that. My calendar is there. Just a lot of. If they want to know about me, they can go to the About Us page. It's all there, kind of. Fairness.org.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't want to put this on the billboard. I wouldn't want to put this on the billboard, but I thought about this too. Mm-hmm. Are we making the place better for our grandchildren?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sounds so trite. That's why I wanted the listening thing first. But it's also important to me.
It's very true.
I vote. I make decisions. I was a member of started the Kansas City Workers' Rights Board of Missouri Justice. Built it up to 60 community leaders. And I would actually bring my grandson to the steering committee meetings. And he'd sit there as a little kid. And one time he said to me, I told him I was going to a meeting. He wasn't going. And he said, "Are you going to that meeting where people are going to make the world a better place?" Oh. And I was just glad, well, that rubbed off on him. Oh. Anyway, I'm a grandpa. I could go on with stories you don't have time for. You could too.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Bob Miner, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. This has been a treat.
Yeah. We want to thank all of those that are out there listening and do check in on the things like especially the videos from Leaning Forward. We really want everybody to be exposed to those. We need help getting those to, I guess, men and women, but especially men that want to be advocates, that want to be activists, that want to do something to help situations. So we encourage you to check out all that stuff. But as always, be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary.
Remember, all that wander in the desert are not lost. We hope that you know
you are seen,
you are heard,
and you are loved.